Welcome. This is an AI-based language assistant. If you've been following this playlist, you know I've created a bunch of chat systems using AI, but this one is not a chat system. This is a custom assistant that translates languages. I built it with the Next.js, LangChain TypeScript, and OpenAI API. Let's see what it can do. I'm going to just type up a sentence here in English. And as you can see, the default is set to Hindi, and that's what it's going to translate to. So let's say, what a wonderful world. Enter, and there it is. Just translated into Hindi, and I actually instructed it to give the English pronunciation of this. For non-speakers who cannot really read, for example, me, most of these languages I can actually understand even a pronunciation in English, but I can't really read the language. In that case, whatever pronunciation is given me here, I know that it actually translated correctly. Now let's go to the next language, copy the same sentence. Let's choose Bengali this time. Enter. All right, there you go. So let's go to the next one, is Urdu. This is the national language of Pakistan. So enter. Oh, look at that, it's Arabic looking, but it's actually Urdu. Let's go talk to the Chinese. Here we go. And there it is again. And for our Filipino audiences, this is the language Tagalog. So let's paste in the same sentence and see it does its magic. And boom, it did it. So throughout the rest of the video, I'll be walking you through the code behind, step by step. Now, before we hit the code, let's go to a diagram to better understand the application architecture. All right, this is the application architecture. I know it might look complex, but once I walk you through it all, you're going to realize it's not really that complex. Plus, now that you're watching this video, I hope that you have certain level of understanding, especially with the React / Next.js basics, TypeScript, etc. That being said, let's start up here. The typical Next.js application, we start right here, create our main page. Under the pages folder, in this case, our page would be Moose Translate GPT, and there will be an index file. Let's verify. We look up here. That's exactly the page name is. Let's start there. And this is basically a very simple one that is doing nothing but bringing this guy in. This is the main component that will have all the page content. And this will be bringing in a bunch of UI UX component. Let's say the display block, sidebar, radio block. This will be our display block, sidebar, radio block. Okay. And then I have also a few more components in the chat common folder under the UI UX. The reason these are common because, as I mentioned before, I build other chatbots and chat systems, and that's where I build these components and I'm bringing it in. That's why they are common components for chatbots. Don't worry, I'll explain it all. But then again, if you visit the earlier video that I built in this playlist, that will give you an excellent idea about what I'm talking about. And these we can find here. The whole display block, if this is that, then this would be the chat message block, which is in charge of formatting the user input and the AI output and making them look pretty. And this would be the user input box, as it says right here, user input bottom. That being said, now we have to go to this guy, the context. Even though this is inside a context, I turned it into a hook so that it's much more flexible. I can just call this hook in any other component if I want to utilize a shared state among the entire application. Now let's focus on this guy. This guy gets the user input from here and then sends it to another hook. This is also another shared component, which I converted into a hook, made it more modular. This one is responsible for taking the user input, making the request to the Next.js backend, and receiving a streaming output, and then convert that streaming output into state, a streaming state, and give it back to this guy so that the chat message component can show it on the browser as a streaming answer. Don't worry, we will explain it all and show you the code. So now next would be this post request is received here, and this is the Next.js backend under pages/API/MooseChat-translate. I made it more modular and created a service here, put it under the /services folder, calling it OpenAI service. And this time we can just call it from anywhere. This just returns a model if you provide them with these 3 arguments: next API response, temperature, which controls the creativity of the model, and the model name, like I said, ChatGPT-4, ChatGPT-4 Turbo, etc. So now it's very modular. And before, once we created a model, we used to do just a model.call and then make the call to the OpenAI API. But this time we are adding these guys here. We're bringing in chat prompt template to create custom templates using variables. And this is exactly where the main prompt engineering happens. This is where we tell the AI how to act, when to act, what to say, what not to say, etc., etc. So once all these are given, and we're also bringing in system message and human message from the LangChain library to create these templates. Once that's done and ready, we call in LLM-chain from LangChain and pass our model and the prompt template, thus creating a chain. And then we call the chain.call, and that's what finally makes the call to the API. And then API sends a response, and that response we send it back to the hook, and from the hook eventually to our main content file. And main content then calls in this chat messages component to make it pretty looking like this. Now that said, now that you have a basic understanding of the architecture, let's hit the code. All right, so we are now at the backend, the Next.js backend, which is under Pages, API, and MooseChat-translate. This is the function that is receiving that hook's call. And for the first time, we're going to be using our LangChain functions. As you can see here, we're bringing in system message prompt template, human message prompt template, chat prompt template from LangChain prompts, and LLM chain from LangChain chains, and the OpenAI service under the services, just like we mentioned right here, this guy, just to create our model. So let's see what that guy looks like. Under services, OpenAI service, let's put them side by side. Okay, so here we are creating the model by calling in the OpenAI service, passing our response object from here, Next.js API response, and the temperature. Since this is a translation app, we want to give it a little bit more creativity. So we are giving it 0.7 as a number. And here is our model name, PT 3.5 Turbo 16K. So once we pass along these arguments, this guy receives all of them right here, and then brings in the chat OpenAI from LangChain and instantiates this class using all these. Actually right here we don't need this, using all these arguments. And this time also it adds streaming to true, so that the response comes in as a stream of tokens. And with the callback, we are actually doing the res.write and the token under this function, handle LLM new token. So whatever token stream it's gonna output to our response, which is next API response. And once said and done, it's going to return the model. And that's what we're receiving here. That's how we're creating the model. And then we are using chat prompt template dot from message, and we're sending it the system message prompt template. And this is where we are giving the whole instruction to the AI as to how to behave and what to do. And we are using input lang as a variable and output lang as the output language variable. We're telling it your name is such and such. You are a helpful assistant that translate input language, let's say English, to output language, let's say Hindi, and you're an answer with a output language which is English, output language which is Hindi, let's say, output language pronunciation in input language which is English, and thus it does this pronunciation in English and the original language so that the non-English speaker can read it. Also, please include the actual language letters and syntax at each answer and the pronunciation in parentheses. Just like this here, pronunciation in parentheses and the original language syntax here. And to solidify its answer, we just give it an example, like let's say English to Hindi. I am Vincent should be as this in English pronunciation. Mera naam Vincent hai. So, and this way it actually understands the instruction better. And then we give it the human message prompt template, user text, and these are the variables. Then we create the chain by using new LLM chain and pass along the prompt, the translation prompt, which is this guy right here, and our LLM, which is the model, this guy right here. Once our chain is created, then we do an await chain.call, and right here we pass our variables input underscore lang and input language, which we gave it here, right here, and input language we brought in from rec.body because in here, in that hook that invokes it, we actually passing all these variables by stringifying in our body, user input prompt, input language, output language, and that's what we are collecting from here, rec.body, prompt, input language, output language, and when we are calling that chain, we are passing all these variables, and these are the ones gets translated into the system prompt via the system prompt template. So this is how we are actually invoking the chain, and this is what's making the call to the backend through this, using the user prompt, calling the OpenAI, and OpenAI is responding back through await chain.call. And once the response ends, we just end it with rest.end. Now let's backtrack our output all the way to Translate GPT. And this is the time to investigate our chat message component, which we are calling it under display block, translate display block. So let's backtrack everything. Don't need this anymore. Okay, so this backend response now will be received inside this, the hook use chat translate, and this is the response object that we receive from our backend. And then from response body get reader, we just read this information and update our chat messages and send these chat messages via the hook to our main content. This is where we get the chat messages, and we eventually send it to our translate display block, which is this block right here. So let's go to our translate display block, and as we can see here, we are sending two props, chat messages, what we received right here through this hook, and is loading, which is the boolean that controls our loading spinner. So now let's look into this chat display block, which is, according to our diagram, we can find it under UI UX translation assistant, translate display block. Let's go there, reset everything, component, UI UX translation assistant, and translate display block. And now we know how we got our chat messages and is loading. So this chat messages, we are, this is the message array. We are mapping it and collecting this message and index and passing to our chat message block. If it is a user message, then it will be true, and if it is not, then it will become an AI message, and the message prop will have just the text, whether or not it's a user prompt or AI message stream, right? So now let's look into the chat message, which is under chat common chat message. According to our diagram, it should be right here, chat common UI UX. So let's go back in there. Finally, we get to see our chat message. Now we're getting this is user and message as a prop. This is the interface which declares prop type, is user boolean, message string. In here, we're just declaring some basic styling, returning this div with the icon and the div with the message styling. And within this markdown block, we are sending our message. This is the message text, and that's what giving us this text well organized and styled correctly. So if you still want to find out about this code block, I recommend you visit my previous video in this series. So this is all that we need to look at here. Now we know we started at the user input bottom and went all the way up here, then all our components and the context that it gave to our radio blocks, the input language, output language, and all that. And then we used this hook, use chat translate to communicate with our backend. And the backend used these guys from LangChain to communicate with the OpenAI API. And from there, we got a response back using awaitchain.call. And we send this response back to our hook, and our hook then gave it back to our translate GPT content, which called the translate display block, and this block called in chat message. Thus, we have our language assistant complete. With that, we conclude the code walkthrough of our language assistant, which was built with Next.js, OpenAI, LangChain, and TypeScript. Thanks for watching.